Hello, and welcome to the Authentically Elisa podcast, Unmasking Your True Self. I'm Elisa Bogarts, your guide on this journey to discovering the most genuine version of yourself. Each episode is a step towards unveiling the incredible power that lies within you as we strip away all the shoulds and shine a light on the coulds. Together, we'll explore the path of self-empowerment, self-confidence, and the courage to be unapologetically you. Thank you for being here. Welcome to part 2 of the expert series. Now, if you didn't catch part 1, go back to episode 15 where we had the expert series part 1. And this is where I asked 3 experts all about authenticity. And the 3 experts are Dagmar Fleming, Robin McTague, and Viviane Winters Israel. So let's jump in. Robin, tell me, what's the most difficult challenge you've had to overcome that was maybe like the consequence of not being your authentic self, and how did you overcome it?
I would say the marriage was one of the most difficult. When we met, I was in one of the most, I would say, lonely parts of my life. Been in a relationship for, I think, about 5 or 7 years, and that was my first long-term relationship and living with someone. And we just grew apart, and I was going to school at night and bettering myself, and this person was going off and wanting to party, and so we just kind of became roommates.
Right.
And then I actually lived on a mountain.
Oh, no way.
So, I mean, great
Awesome.
metaphor, right? And I had one friend there. We lived in this housing co-op, but I didn't really have any friends because I was working full time, and then my spare time was all going to school. I was finishing my degree at night and all these different things. So I'd never allowed myself a social life. Like growing
Mm,
up, I didn't have time to play, none of that. It was just about surviving and then getting a better life and not being in poverty. So I was really driven to have that security. And so we met, and it was like this nice balance. I thought the person was different because they played sports. They'd actually been drafted for professional sports. So I figured they're not a drinker, because I was kind of attracted to those romantic writers, and which were often drinkers. So the alcoholic, like my dad. And
right.
I wanted that security. So I said, yeah, if we're going to buy a place together, let's get married. And my blinders on, the bad behavior that I just forgave because it was so normal in my family. So the anger would build up. So it'd be that kind of passive aggressive, but really quiet. And then there'd be a blow up about once a year. And then it
Mm.
got violent. And part of me, as it went on, was thinking, how do I get out of this? And I was thinking, I wish he would die.
Mm.
That's how bad it got, because I didn't see a way out, because that freezing, right, that I lived with when I was growing up.
Right.
And so when we had a big blow up, we went for counseling separately. He was supposed to work on anger management. I did go and do the work. I started working with the sexual abuse and those things. So I got stronger. And after 3 years, when it happened again, quite severely, I got thrown out the door, locked behind me, um, food thrown around the kitchen, you name it. And I just said, that's it. I said, and then it was like, oh, I'm sorry, the usual thing. But it's like, well, let's start again. Let's start from scratch. I said, if I was to start from scratch, you're not the person I would pick now, because I'm different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I was going to say, how can you even start from scratch after all of that? It's just, yes.
No, because I put everything I loved on hold. I wasn't going to live theater that I love. He was like a top amateur golfer, so the weekends were all about him and me waiting around, and my life was on hold. And
Right.
so, yeah, it was that fresh air when I left. And even when I had asked him to come and help me with something, it was interesting because it was still that controlling behavior, and I could see it. And I
Mm.
just said, we're not together anymore. And, you're not going to control me. We can't stay friends. This is not going to work.
Good for
And
you.
then I stayed friends with his mom. She was like my second mom or third mom. And she lived where I lived and was my cat sitter and all of that. And she died a couple of years later. So I went to the home where the service was and I saw his new partner. She was like the old me. She was a cookie cutter, the same blonde hair, the same look. She was into psychology. And it was like looking into a mirror and
Mm.
thinking, oh my gosh, that was me. I'm so glad I'm out of it.
Right.
But it really was getting into doing the meditational work and learning to teach that and getting really strong energy boundaries, all of those things.
Yeah. So I was just gonna ask you that's how you overcame it, was really tapping into all that
Yeah,
and
and really
making it a
looking at,
practice.
yeah, it's like how do I want to live? Like, how often do we ask ourselves, or if the question comes up, we just, oh, it's okay, right? I got to get through my day to day.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and prioritizing that, I find sometimes, like, how even just giving yourself the time and space to think, "How do I wanna live?" And then actually starting to live it, starting to build those habits, starting to, like, integrate it into your life so that you can eventually get there. Because I think if you kinda just sorta do it full stop, that doesn't really work. You kinda gotta, like, do it bit by bit to, like, slowly become who you wanna
Baby
be.
steps, right?
Mhm.
Like if we think of a child learning to walk, we don't say, oh, you fell down, you're never going to walk again.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
We have to build that resiliency. And that's what I have found for myself is I've been able to build that resiliency and get through the different challenges. And we need to do that in all those ways, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physically, because if one is so out of whack, same with our motivators, when I do that work, it's like if I'm so focused on one thing, like with a lot of entrepreneurs, right, making money, for example, or if I'm so high in growth and I want to learn and I'm into a shiny object, what happens to relationships and what happens to that achievement, right? We need to
Mm.
look at, wow, what am I missing out on by being so focused on that? And
Yeah.
usually that's what helps people to kind of, oh, yeah, I haven't talked to my best friend in 6 months.
Right. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
So,
So,
Vivian, tell me, what's the most difficult challenge you've had to overcome that was maybe like, a consequence of not being your authentic self? And how did you kind of overcome it?
Well, when you mentioned for wanting that challenged my authenticity, it was one in a way when I had to leave my ex-husband of 9 and a quarter years, it something had really changed in him and how he was being with me and with everyone, and I think it was because his liver was getting pickled. Um, And I could not stay, I had to leave. My daughter was 13 months old, I just 2 days out of the hospital with meningitis, but I could not raise her in this situation. I couldn't. I would be being inauthentic if I'd stay there. They said, "Oh, what are you doing? Stay for the child." No, the child is why not because of her, but because I can't bring her up like this. If I stay with this individual in how he's treating me and how things are being one, I will resent him. My little baby daughter is not going to know the right kind of love and connection. And now, while she knows who he is. He's her dad, but in the way an itty bitty little person does. If I raised her with through that, then I wouldn't have been able to really live with myself. We had to go, and it was
Yeah.
phenomenally hard, but I had to go. And in another circumstances, I was 550 miles away from wherever we had come from just a few years prior. But
Mm.
that all needed to happen. But all I needed to do, which wasn't that easy, I just needed to reach out and tell somebody what was going on. A friend
Yeah.
I'd grown up with, because my parents were back east, they didn't even know I'd been in the hospital. This was before Google and smartphones and pagers and all that kind of stuff. Um, just reaching out to someone and telling them what's up, it helped the things feel less overwhelming. And once I had told my friend, I said, I'm going to have to come down there for about a week, find a job, find a place to live, and find childcare, blah, 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 550 miles from where I am, and I'm sick. um, and then I needed to go to a bookstore to get something on divorce. And but I
Right.
couldn't with my daughter with that situation right at that time with the post-meningitis. Um, so I had to ask a neighbor if she would watch my daughter. She was more than happy to. And the end of that first day was better than the beginning when it all blew up in my face, when my whole everything was just flying everywhere. And that was in one day. And that was with reaching out
Mhm.
and a random blessed thought that came to me of you need to look at this as an adventure. I embraced that thought, thank
Yes.
goodness. And I just went through each thing. Is it why that I grasped onto it? I don't know, but I'm sure glad I did. I don't really know the origin of it. We could say divine intervention, but that made a difference. But there was a time as far as that I had, so I had to leave that before I became authentic with myself, because it
Right.
was the point where I was having to cover for my husband's behavior. So that was a big one. There was an
Mm.
actual financial one later on, but when I look at that, yeah, I had to do that to not continue to be more inauthentic with myself because I'd gotten to a place of being inauthentic in covering for his behavior, making excuses for his behavior. It's like there's another
Right.
little creature involved in this, and this can't be.
And I love that and I love that you sort of had that realization because even to this day, and I see uh, some friends of mine or people that I know that are staying in marriages for the children, and maybe they weren't, like they're not necessarily like abusive or anything, but just that unhappy, and they know that maybe they could leave if they're having issues or working through things. And I think that so many people stay for the kids, and I, in my mind, I think, well, what messages is that sending your children? Yeah, about love, about relationships, about husband, wife, about being a mother, or, but there's so many things because the kids they watch everything that we do, right? And repeat things and
Yes,
they learn things, and there's all that
yes,
the conditioning that happens and the decisions that they make that goes so deep that we only sort of uncover later on. And so, and I often think of that is that, yeah, what are those messages? And do you want your child to grow up with those messages, with those beliefs, as opposed to being like, yes, this is going to be hard. And I would love my kids to have both parents in a happy marriage. However, that's not the reality. Therefore, I need to shift it. And
exactly.
so congratulations to you for doing that. And I love the reframe that you had of the adventure. This is an adventure, because what a
That
sort
was
of
a
an
blessed thought.
exciting kind of fun way to try to motivate yourself to do that, even though I'm sure, yeah, it was a lot to do and terrifying, and but to kind of to have that little bit of a different viewpoint that was a bit more positive. I love that.
Yeah, it was a gift. It truly it was a gift. And when another physical crisis I had about 11 years later, I had no self-care tools. I didn't have a beautiful little thought that came to me that I grasped, and that was a horror show. So yes, that thought was very welcomed, and I'm glad I grabbed onto it because it did make a large difference. And we were talking about, not wanting to raise your child in this situation. One of my pet peeves is saying, well, children are resilient. It's I think that gets overused, and
Yeah.
I have been with children that have had to be resilient and spend either thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, or years trying to manage the fact that they were resilient.
Right.
Put in
Yes.
a place
Yes.
of, oh, you're resilient. And it's not that whoever's having that thought is having it to the child's known to the child's detriment, but
Right.
thinking it or being willing to believe it, I don't think it's true.
As a reason to stay.
You
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
through it. It's not a reason to stay. You
No.
need to do what you need to do. And it may be very hard. For me, it was very hard. The truth is, it would have been harder. My whole rest of life, my daughter's entire life would have been
Right.
far harder had I stayed. And I
That's
have
it right there.
examples of that is other family members and friends that, yeah, I'm glad I did that. I don't have any regrets for having done that.
Yeah. And that's it
And we
right
have been,
there.
my daughter and I
Thank you.
have been like this since day one. So we still are. She turns 40 this year. I turned 70. But
Nice.
yeah, we've always been incredibly close. So yeah.
Well, thank you for that. So Dagmar, tell me, what's the sort of like a difficult challenge that you've had to overcome that was the consequence of not being your authentic self, and how did you overcome it?
I spent over 20 years in an international business career, and I absolutely loved it. But underneath the surface, there was a part of me that was really hidden. I was born with intuitive abilities and an empath, energy healing abilities, and my soul came to claim those gifts. So I
Mm.
started working with people and helping them release emotional and mental blocks to success. And for a while, I was living in two completely different worlds. On one hand, I was helping manufacturers of construction, mining, and agriculture equipment to export their products, while on the other side, I was really helping people heal their inner child wounds and step into their innate gifts. So there was this dichotomy within me where I had this corporate persona, a business badass persona, and on the other side, I was highly spiritual. And the first time I got an opportunity for a radio interview where I would present this deeper metaphysical side of my abilities, I was petrified.
Mm.
All I could think of is everyone that I've worked with, this men dominated industry, very corporate, very business-like, revenue driven, and then stepping into this beautiful quantum realm of shifting into possibilities of working with the law of attraction. So the first time I was asked to do a radio interview, I was paralyzed with fear.
Mm.
And this was a critical moment because I had to decide which part of me was the true me, which part of me was trying to come to the surface and say, here I am. This is who I am. Can I just be me? And
Mm.
I realized that I could be both of these sides. So I launched Unlock Your Success for business owners, for entrepreneurs, for people who are business revenue expansion driven, and I'm helping them release these emotional and mental blocks, release their internal limitations so that they can create the business of their dreams and have the impact in the world. So I took both sides of me, I combined them, and now I feel super comfortable simply showing up as me. And I call myself a business badass and spiritual gangster.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much for that. I love that was like, yes. Amazing overcoming it. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to be part of this very important conversation.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope it inspired you to live a more authentic life. I'd love your help in inspiring more people to live authentically. So please follow, rate, and leave a review so we can create a ripple effect of authenticity. Until next time, stay true to you, be bold, and thrive on your own terms. This is Elisa, signing off authentically.